ready to start.
Yeah.
Once upon a time.
In the early 40s, about 42 or 43, my daddy and Uncle Lindell had a construction company called the Alabama Tank Company. They moved water tanks around, painted them and constructed them and built them and put them up and so forth. And so part of their equipment in that company consisted of a couple of great big trucks. One of them was just a big truck with sideboards on it, and another one was a truck called a winch truck. And it had a winch on the back and an A-frame stuck out the back of it for lifting heavy loads up off the ground. And so there was a lady lived a few miles from us, Miss Weeden, that lived on a plantation. And she had a cow to fall into a concrete silo, which is just a big hole in the ground with concrete floor and sides. And the cow couldn't get out. It wasn't hurt, but it was down in there. It's about 15 feet deep. So she heard Daddy and Uncle Lindell had this truck, and she knew that it had some kind of unpleasant connotation, some kind of lewd woman, but she didn't know exactly what it was. So she called Daddy on the phone and asked him to bring his bitch truck over there and get her cow out of the silo. She had heard it was a winch truck, but she couldn't remember exactly what it was. She just knew it was some kind of bad woman truck. So I went with Daddy and Uncle Lindell, and we went over there and we backed the truck up and let the crane down into that hole, and Daddy got down there and tied ropes under the front legs and the back legs of the cow and hooked the cable on and just lifted the cow straight up, and then we drove forward and set the cow down on the ground unhurt, and so the cow was all right then. But the funny part of it was she had heard that the name of the truck was a winch truck, and she couldn't think of that name, so she said, "How about bringing your bitch truck over here and get my cow out of the silo?" End of story.
I'm fading out.
Oh, one time when I was about, I guess I was in the 8th grade, I was going to Kilby Training School, which is connected to the college up there, and we used to go swimming a couple of times a week in the college pool. So me and Carlos was arguing one night, and I told him that I could swim the length of that pool underwater, and he didn't believe it. He said, "No, you can't." He said, "Nobody can swim that far underwater." So we made a bet. At that time, we was our older sisters was gone, so me and Carlos and Ronnie had to wash the dishes and everything at home at night after supper. So we made a bet that if I could swim the length of that pool underwater, then he would roll me in a wheelbarrow from our house up to the ball diamond. And if I lost and didn't swim it, then I'd have to wash dishes 25 straight nights. So sure enough, when we went swimming the next week up there at that college pool, I got one of our student teachers, I told him what our bet was, so I got down at the shallow end of the pool and dove in, and sure enough, I swam underwater the whole 25 yards, the whole length of the pool, and touched the other end and come up, touched the other end and come up. And then I got that teacher to write a note and sign it, proving to Carlos that I did it. So he had to get a wheelbarrow and roll me from our house all the way to the ball diamond. But he wouldn't go up the highway, he carried me around the back roads.
Which was how many miles?
Oh, it was about 1.5 miles, I guess. But he made damn sure we went the back roads and not up the main part of the highway.
I'm fading out.
I think Alton has already told this story in the book, but he might have left out a couple of parts that I want to add to it. And that's the story about Uncle Lindell and them having a couple of mules, and one of them died, and we had to...
Go ahead.
We had to drag drag it down in the big pasture and bury it. So we got the other mule and we drug the dead mule down in the pasture down near a big swing we had in a big hickory tree down there on the hillside. And so we was digging the hole. This was in the summertime, about July, and we was digging the hole right next to the dead mule, which had already begun to smell pretty bad by then. And so we would dig a while, then we'd swing a while, then we'd battle with hickory nuts, rocks, and fight a while. So consequently, we wasn't making too much progress on digging that hole. It done took us 2 or 3 days. So finally, we got the hole right next to the mule, deep as we thought it should be, and so we got up there then and proceeded to take timbers and roll the mule over in the hole. And as luck would have it, the mule turned and landed straight on its back with its legs sticking up straight up in the air. And unfortunately, the legs stuck up above ground level. So we didn't know what in the world we was going to do. We couldn't get the mule out of the hole at that time. At that point, there wasn't no way to get the mule out of the hole. So I don't know who really came up with the idea. It might have been me. But the bottom line is we went and got a handsaw and sawed that mule's legs off and buried the legs right down next to the mule. And by doing that, we was able to cover the mule up a little bit, get a little bit of dirt over him. And so we cut his legs off with a handsaw and buried him down beside of him, and managed to get the mule buried then.
Amen. Okay.
My dad was killed in an industrial accident when I was 10 years old, so I don't remember a whole lot about him, but I do remember some things. Our families and Uncle Endel's families used to visit back and forth pretty regularly because there wasn't things like television, and people just had to amuse themselves, and they visited a whole lot more back then than they do now. And my dad was something of a show-off anyway. And so I remember when the families would get together, the ladies would be in the house cooking, and the kids and the husbands would be out on the porch or in the yard or something. And my daddy, being something of a show-off, he would always try to show how strong he was. So one of the ways he would do that is lay down flat on his back on the ground, and his brother, which was my Uncle Lindell, which was a pretty good sized man, probably weighed 185 and 190 pounds, he would stand in my daddy's hands while he was laying down on the ground on his back. And Daddy then would raise him up and put his hands all the way up in the air, and then get up into a sitting position, still holding Uncle Lindell standing in his hands, and then simply get up all the way into a standing position, still holding Uncle Lindell up in his hands, standing straight up. And he'd do that to show all of us how strong he was. Way back in the early 40s, probably 41 or 42, my grandmother and them had a house, an old house down on Dudley Avenue, a big house. And one Sunday afternoon, we had some relatives come here to Florence to visit us from Huntsville. The Kegel, 2 or 3 families up there all came here to spend Sunday with us, and the Kegels, which were cousins of ours from Huntsville. And consequently, there was 4 or 5 families down there. It's just one house eating Sunday dinner. And so there was several married couples, adults, and probably 12 or 15 kids there running around, and several cars parked around the house there. And so the back side of this house had a patio that was probably 8 to 10 feet in the air, and there were cars parked around the house in various places. And one of the kids managed to slam the car door on its hand, and it was hung in the car door and was screaming bloody murder. And so the men were sitting on this back patio there, and they could see what had happened, and all the men, and there wasn't no steps coming down from the patio, and all the men jumped up and began to run back through the house so they could come out the other door and run around and get the kid out. Well, my daddy, naturally being the show-off that he was, he didn't run back through the house. He just bounded off the front part of the patio, which was 10 or 12 feet in the air, and jumped off the back of the patio and hit the ground. And naturally, he got to the kid first and opened the door and got his hand out of the door. But that's kind of the fella he was. He was always the center of attraction, the one to do something to call attention. And he just didn't do things like ordinary people did. He always managed to do the exception to extraordinary things. So he didn't wait to come back through the house. He just bounded off the front part.
And where was this house?
This house was down on, it's right in the corner of Broadway Street and Dudley Avenue, down on the lower part of the south side of Broadway Street.
And that was Miles' house?
That was Ma and Ella and Papa's old house that they lived in from the 30s into the 40s to about 43 or 44. They lived there until then. So